It is a new week, and it's another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. Follow me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. The Royals had their day one picks. What did we make of picks 1, 2, and 3 with them? They went prep catcher with their first pick, prep arm with their second, and a money-saving college pick with their third pick. Were they all the right selections? We're going to get into that next on Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Things first, we want to thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen every day when it comes to these Kansas City Royals. And though the All-Star break is coming up, we're still going to have a lot of draft coverage for you all week long. And when you do make us your first listen every day, we're obviously going to pop up on all those podcasting platforms. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music. You also can check us out on YouTube. Just be sure to subscribe and follow along, and you will never miss any video that I put up there or anything on the podcasting page. You always see our links pop up with the title of it. Very simple, very easy to catch all your news with the Kansas City Royals. Our show is always Monday through Friday. Of course, you'll be watching this, listening to this on hopefully a Monday morning or a Monday afternoon. But we're going to be talking about the events from last night. The draft picks the Royals made in the 2023 Major League Baseball draft. If you were listening last week, you would have heard all of our predictions. You would have heard the guys that I like. Of course, Kyle Teel was 1A for me. Matt Shaw was 1B. Enrique Bradfield Jr. was 1D, I believe. And I think Chase Davis was 1C. I know I went a little bit out of order there. But that's how I set up my personal preferences. And none of those guys are Kansas City Royals. Instead, the Royals go with Blake Mitchell, a prep hitting catcher, with their first round selection, the 8th overall pick. I'm going to be completely honest, completely candid with my opinions on it, because I don't think there's going to need to be a scenario in which I sugarcoat this. I also don't need to hammer the pick and be overly negative when I've never seen the kid play. But I think when you have a guy like Kyle Teel available and a really good defensive catcher, a great hitting catcher, I thought the third best college bat in the draft. I felt like it was a no-brainer. I felt like that was the simple pick for Kansas City. Like, you didn't need to overthink that. He fell right into your lap. You didn't need to have the sexy pick. You didn't need to have the reach. You didn't need to go underslot. Let's be quite honest here. This farm system is completely bare. Completely bare. Top to bottom. The major league team doesn't have much to build around. You can't really be reaching for guys where you're putting all the faith in a scouting department, a player development system that hasn't churned out enough talent, churned out all-star talent. That's what worries me. So when Rob Manfred reads off Blake Mitchell to the fans out there in Seattle at the podium, my thoughts were not as positive. I was frustrated that the Royals did not take Kyle Teel, and the fact they went with a prep hitting catcher over all the guys that I had suggested in Locked On Royals right here on this podcast. And the track record for a prep hitting catcher is not very good. I tweeted this out, and again, you can always follow me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. I tweeted this out soon after the pick. And actually, I got corrected a little bit thanks to one of the followers on Twitter. But the last time a prep hitting catcher was taken top 10 was in 2008. Okay? And that guy only played 4 major league games. Never recorded a hit. So you have to go back to 2008, the last time a prep catcher was taken inside the top 10. And the Royals took Blake Mitchell at number 8. So you have 2008, on your radar here. And the last time a prep hitting catcher that was drafted as a catcher recorded a hit in the big leagues was Joe Mauer. And Joe Mauer was taken in 2001. That's the last time a guy that was drafted as a catcher coming out of high school found a way to get to the big leagues and have a hit. So if Mitchell makes it, he would be the first catcher to do so since Joe Mauer. Now there's the technicality. I'm trying to go back through my Twitter now. It was Kyle Skipworth, the kid they took in 2008, the Miami Marlins, never got a hit at the big league level. But this was interesting to me because I want to pull up his name and make sure I get this right. But there was a bit of a technicality of the top 10 catcher that made it the big league level, but he was drafted as an outfielder. This was back in 2014, a guy for the Seattle Mariners. And I'm trying to scroll here, stalling a little bit, if you will. But it was Alex Jackson, Seattle Mariners. So he's drafted as an outfielder, moves to catcher, wasn't very good at the big league level, but that technically counts, I guess, if you want to say a top 10 pick was a prep catcher, a guy that transitioned to the catching position. But if you're just talking about guys that were drafted as catchers, they were not playing shortstop, outfield, had to move to that position. The last one to get a hit at the big league level was Joe Mauer. So that's what Blake Mitchell has working against him. And I just simply thought the Royals didn't need to be too cute here. This is a pick that fell right into your lap. And I don't think it was really signability. That didn't really seem like a problem to me. And even if it was a little bit more money than you were going to give Blake Mitchell, why are you trying to underslot with your first round pick? I know you want to spread around the money. You want to make sure this draft as a whole is very well balanced, right? You don't want to just have one guy come from this draft and he's the big get and everybody else were failures, never got above AAA. But do you see the reoccurring theme in Kansas City when it comes to spreading the money around? I liked last year's draft more so in the later rounds, and I really liked 2021's draft when they went underslot with Frank Mozzicato. Now, that worked out at the time, and I remember at that point in time, a lot of Royals fans were up in arms about taking a guy that was, I want to say, in the late 20s, early 30s on the rankings. Might have even been lower than that. But it worked out. At the same time, that's a prep pitcher who's a left-hander. That's still above a prep pitcher that's a right-hander and a prep catcher, just because of track record. And the thing with Blake Mitchell, I know that it's a new era of catchers. When you go out and draft him, you can move him around. Hell, look at the big league level right now. MJ Melendez was a catcher. They moved him to a corner outfield spot. But I don't think that's what I was looking for if you were going to prep hitting catcher, right? You took Carter Jensen a few years back in the second round. I know what you always want to load up with a lot of talent in the farm system, but I don't know if I can get on board with passing on the best college bat that was available at that spot to try to reach an extra ceiling through a prep catcher, especially when your track record and the history of prep hitting catchers is not very good. This just felt like a bit of a reach to me. And I did not think Kansas City needed to be reaching in the first round. They could have played it simple. I didn't think there was going to be a big-time thought process with this all week long. What I was seeing on Twitter, what I was hearing was, if Kyle Teal's there, the Royals are going to go with that pick. Then there was a little bit of hope that, well, if they went underslot with Mitchell, then they could maybe get Colin Houck at 44 because he really plummeted. But the Mets scooped him up around the early 30s, mid-30s. And they go with Blake Wolters in the second round, who we'll get to here shortly. I don't know, though, that this didn't really wow me. It didn't grab me. I knew Blake Mitchell was certainly a prospect they were going after. He was in those conversations. He was one of like 5 guys that I think made sense for Kansas City. But at the end of the day, this could have been very simple. I would have been very happy with Kyle Teal at 1 or Matt Shaw at 1, Enrique Bradfield Jr. at 1, Chase Davis at 1, and then I'm all right not overspending at picks 44 and 66. I was okay with that because I wanted to get a surefire pick with that first rounder. There is no guarantee whatsoever that Blake Mitchell is a big-time get. Now, let me clarify that. There really is no guarantee ever for first-round picks, second-round picks, third-round picks. You can't look at the kid and go, yeah, he's going to be a superstar. You can still go and make a prediction. You can have a gut reaction. At the end of the day, though, it's all guessing. It's a crapshoot. It is really, really hard to churn out talent year in, year out. But I felt like of all the years, this was a big one to almost ensure that you would have a fast riser in the system. I thought Kyle Tia would move through high A, double A, triple A rather quickly. Thought he was a very progressive and I think a developed, mature bat. Didn't really need to worry about your scouting department, analytics department, player development team botching it with him. I am worried they could botch it with Blake Mitchell. I'm worried they could botch it with Blake Wolters because those were two reaches and those were two positions that typically don't have a good track record. If you are a great drafting club, if you are, let's say, the Houston Astros, then yeah, I'm okay taking a couple of high ceiling guys, but the floor could be never making it to the big league level. But you're not. You're an organization that constantly struggles with that. And that's what concerns me with Blake Mitchell. I'm not going to say the kid's a bust. I've never seen him play. He could still be a stud. But when that pick was announced, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a bit disappointed that Kyle Tia was passed on or Matt Shaw was passed on. Enrique Bradfield Jr. Felt like it fell into your laps, but clearly that wasn't the case. Royals go with a bit of an underslot with a prep hitting catcher at pick number 8 with Blake Mitchell. Hopefully I can be wrong. I want to be proven wrong with things like this. Track record's just not good, though. And that's a big-time concern. And really, when you think about it, this is the draft we're all going to go back to with this scouting department, this development team, JJ Piccolo. This is going to be the one we look back on. If it's wrong, if it's another failure, I don't think they're going to get another draft. There's big-time stakes here for the front office of the Kansas City Royals. We're going to get to pick number 2 here coming up very, very shortly. They took a prep right-handed arm in Blake Wolters. Big fastball, put on a lot of weight in his senior year of high school. This actually was my favorite pick of the night. I'll tell you why next on Locked On Royals. Thank you for keeping it Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. Follow me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. And before we go any further, talk about last night's second overall pick for the Royals, at least in their 3 picks of the night. Then with the right-handed pitcher, Blake Wolters. Let's give a shout out to today's title sponsor because this show, Locked On Royals, this Monday edition, is brought to you by BetterHelp. Whether you're dealing with decisions around your career, relationships, or anything else, therapy helps you stay connected so you can move forward with confidence and excitement. Now, where I'm podcasting from right now, I just moved into a new home. There's always going to be the stress of paying the bills. If things are broken, I got to find a way to fix it. And when a lot of stress comes from that, it's good to have somebody to talk to. And BetterHelp can provide you with that. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, so it can definitely fit into your schedule. You got work in the morning, don't need to worry about going to another office. BetterHelp, you just get all of that online. So here's what you need to do. You need to take a quick questionnaire, and you'll get matched up with your therapist. That's what you can get with BetterHelp. It doesn't really matter if you've never done therapy before because I think, in essence, everybody needs a little bit of therapy from time to time. You need somebody to talk to. So here's what you need to do. Let therapy be your map with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnMLB today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn. So the Royals took last night a prep arm with their second overall pick in the second round. I know I'm not really saying those words correctly, but you get what I mean. The second guy they took in last night's Major League Baseball draft. But this really was my favorite pick. As much as I was against a prep arm that was especially a right-hander, I was all right with where they took Blake Wolters. At the same time, I thought maybe they were trying to hit a home run in the second round, and then when it came to be, the big-time home run guys were all gone. So Blake Wolters, to me, was the best available guy when the Royals were picking. But then I go back to pick number 8, where they went with Blake Mitchell, And I think maybe in their minds was, we'll go a bit of an underslot here, then really hit it out of the park with picks 44 and pick 66. So I felt like maybe a call on Houck falls there. I was foolish in that. There was no way in hell he was going to be falling to 44. I did like Cameron Johnson, a big left-hander that I believe was on his way to LSU. Thought he could profile into, one of those guys you build up to be a number one, number two rotational guy at the big league level. But again, he's an 18-year-old. He's a left-handed arm. I like that a bit better than a right-handed prep arm. But that's what you got in Blake Wolters. And Blake Wolters, to me, has that fastball that can get him moving quickly through low A Columbia, maybe even get him up to Quad Cities next year. But it's still an 18-year-old kid. And I have questions about the secondary pitch. I think the slider is really good. But again, it's not polished yet. It's not at a mature point where he's just going to breeze through it. And maybe that was me getting carried away. Maybe that was me getting carried away that with all 3 picks tonight, I was going to be thrilled by it. I wanted a win in 2023 where you feel like, man, every single one of these guys I'm all on board with. This feels like a home run at 1, a home run at 2, a home run at 3. But I walked away with picks 1 and 2 going, I'm not too high on pick 1. And pick 2 is like when you get a decent burger, kind of fills you up, but you're hungry like an hour or 2 later. Like fine in the moment. It made up for maybe the burger I wasn't too pleased with the last time around. But this time around, it satisfied me for a little bit. But then I go, well, that's the right pick. But then I'm starting to second guess my first pick. Like the fastball, but if he's a left-hander, I think he goes a lot higher if he's throwing 98, 99. In fact, Wolters topped out at 99 in the spring. I think he was sitting about 94 to 96 early on in games, could ramp it up from time to time. And that arm will continue to build, and hopefully the Royals can develop him right. But back to the point that we had in regards to Blake Mitchell. So the Royals needed the hit on their 3 picks tonight. I know that sounds harsh. I know it's expecting a lot from an organization that doesn't do that a lot. But where you're at, you can't afford 3 whiffs. And they're really taking risks with picks 1 and 2. Last night, as I'm seeing Blake Mitchell get drafted and then Nate Wolters, I'm going, all right, well, JJ Picollo, this front office, they clearly believe in this developmental process. They believe in their scouts, which have time and again proven they don't hit many times. But these scouts do know the game. They're scouts for a reason. And the front office, JJ Picollo, they believe in them. They believe in their player development. I just thought they made it harder on themselves, though. Now you're expecting your first 2 picks to really become big-time studs, big-time stars. And yeah, I think when you get an 18-year-old and they start to become a big-time prospect, well, you can get them up to the big leagues at 21, 22 instead of a college arm or a college bat where they could be 24, 25. A couple of extra years there can be a key cog in your rotation. It's also counting on and banking on your player development system, which has not been very good. I know it's been better this year, but still, you look around the league, feels like teams are just churning out talent over and over again. They're never having to worry about a shortage of talent. So when trying to reload your farm system, you're going the hard route here. The first 2 picks, they are less of a guarantee than maybe who you could have gotten in the first round, right? Kyle Teal could have been a guy that moves quickly, or a Matt Shaw moves quickly. And then maybe your second round guy doesn't turn out to be much, but now we're gambling on the first 2. You are gambling on 2 positions that do not have a good track record, even with a good fastball, even with a semi-good secondary pitch. It's just worrisome to me. And I don't want to come down on the pick too harshly. Like I said with Blake Mitchell, I haven't seen Blake Wolters pitch. I don't know what all of his numbers look like. I've seen film. I've seen the scouting report. I've seen his draft grades. A 65 grade fastball. That's not bad for a second rounder. There's just a drop off. There always is going to be a drop off when you're trying to go with an underslot the first round and then you miss a little bit when trying to really knock it out of the park. Last year, they go with Gavin Cross with their first round selection. But I like the Caden Wallace selection a lot more in the second round. That, to me, was what you saved your money for a little bit. Caden Wallace is shown that right now at the minor league level, he's better than Gavin Cross. That's why I was okay, much more so with last year's picks 1 and 2. But Gavin Cross could still come around. It's his first year of professional ball. First full year professional ball, that is. But Caden Wallace has progressed further than him. Because you saved a little bit of money, use it on Caden Wallace. This year, you saved money with Blake Mitchell, but I can't say that you really overspent with your second pick in Blake Wolters. Like the fastball. Never going to complain about an 18-year-old that's got a 99-mile-an-hour fastball right now. Maybe you progress with that, even gets bigger, and you're talking about a triple-digit fastball and a guy you could plug into the rotation 4 to 5 years from now. I know a lot of fans don't want to hear that. You want to hear about guys that can impact the team a year or two from now. These guys are going to take time. And it's putting a lot of faith in the pitching development, which has been better. Which is why, of the 3 picks they made last night, this makes the most sense. This is the one I was on board with. I trust the pitching development a little bit more than working with a hitter. Now, the big numbers for, I would say, Blake Mitchell was he had 51 walks and 8 strikeouts in high school. It is high school, but those are great numbers. Those are numbers I don't think the Royals looked at in players in previous years. With Nate Wolters, it's a big arm. It's a big arm you're probably trying to pair or get into a wave of those 18, 19-year-old Dominican Summer League guys. Emmanuel Reyes comes to mind. You're trying to continue to just pump out pitching talent. That's important to have. But Blake Wolters, he was my favorite pick last night. He was the one that made the most sense. I think he was the 41st ranked prospect in MLB Pipeline. Royals took him at 44. Not going to complain about that. Now, the last kid they took was a college bat where I think they saved a little bit of money. But I did like this pick maybe second most last night. You can kind of get where I'm going with this. Wasn't too high on Blake Mitchell. Starting to warm up to picks 2 and 3. That's coming up next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. Follow me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. We have one more draft pick to go over for this Monday show of Locked On Royals. But before we do that, let's give a shout out to another sponsor of today's podcast. That is Sleeper. Now, the Home Run Derby is coming up, so I'm going to give you another pick that I like going into that Home Run Derby in Seattle. I feel like a lot of people are sleeping on Luis Robert. No, he's a guy that's having an incredible breakout season for the White Sox. Bad year for the Sox. I think many Royals fans are complaining about it. But Luis Robert is my pick. I'm going to go with him to win the Home Run Derby in Seattle. It's maybe not the sexy pick. I really do like Luis Robert. I know he's not going to be the hometown favorite, but I think he's really going to pop in the 2023 Major League Baseball Home Run Derby. Now, do you want to win your money 100 times faster by playing daily fantasy baseball? Sleeper is now offering up to 100 times the payout. For up to 8-pick contest, choose as many as 8 players that you like and pick more or less on your favorite baseball stats such as home runs, strikeouts, hits, and more. So get your picks right and you could win big with Sleeper. That is where I go for fantasy baseball, and that's where I'm going to continue to go to making my picks right here on Locked On Royals. The last pick that the Royals went with to close out day one was one that I feel like was not on my radar. Let's just be quite as simple as that. I do not think that Carson Roccaforte was on my radar at all. And I know once you get into rounds 3, 4, and 5, you're going to see teams trying to save money in certain places. You're going to try to find value in some guys where maybe other teams aren't. You have a pitcher who has a ERA. I know it's not everything, but an ERA north of 5 or 6, but a power fastball. Maybe you take a chance there. Save some money. But what the Royals did with Carson Roccaforte was that he feels like, to me, a bit of a contact guy. Not big walk numbers, struck out 22 more times than he walked. And I'm not sure the power's really there. I would say the speed is certainly an intriguing factor. The Royals like their speed. They like their defense. But I can't say this is one where maybe it's worth it to save money. That's where I'm kind of going to go with this argument. Now, this felt like another money-saving pick. This was a guy that was not high on many of the draft boards, but the Royals clearly like their own guys. They like guys with speed. I know that this front office, the scouting department, is trying to take a different approach. They're trying to be more analytical. But Carson Roccaforte, I just don't think had the numbers for me college-wise that popped. He had a great sophomore season, really, really good sophomore season. But his junior year, I don't think it really felt like it was third-round material. No, I think in one of his player comps was Andrew Benintendi. Now, let's pump the brakes a little bit because Andrew Benintendi was a Golden Spikes winner, okay? He was a first-rounder, moved rather quickly with the Red Sox, was hitting in the top half of that lineup in a World Series run. I'm not saying that Carson Roccaforte is going to be that kid. And I would say that the strikeout numbers, though not astronomical, aren't what I'm looking for. I think the strikeout rate was around 22%, walked around 15% of the time. I want to like this pick a little bit more. I'm just maybe not as high on waiting till the third round to get your college bat. College bat felt like that was going to be in the first round. In the third round, your first college bat, and I'm not so sure this is a safe pick either. That's where I'm at with this third round pick. I want to know a little bit more about it. Like I said, I'm not going to call all these picks busts, but I think I'm kind of feeling and sharing the same feelings as a lot of you are out there. Maybe you're freaking out, really mad, want the entire scouting department, the front office gutted, and you want to start over. I get it. You have reasons to be frustrated, irritated, irate with that entire group because they have not pumped out a lot of all-star talent. And J.J. McCall is banking on this class to be pretty damn good. He's putting a lot of faith in that department. Here's what I'll leave everybody with, though. The Royals are at a crossroads here, and maybe I'm being too dramatic, maybe I'm not. But I just have a parting message for you all. This draft is so vitally important because it's going to go one or two ways. Either the Royals scouting department got it right, the player development gets these guys like Blake Mitchell's, Blake Wolters, and Carson Roccaforte, and they excel them to a AA, AAA level within the next year or two. They're moving that quickly. And then you make them into big league players that are above average. So that's the first round. I know it's very unlikely, but that's the first round. Then what that does is puts faith back in the scouting department, in the player development system, and we're feeling better about them pumping out more all-star talent. Not saying these kids will be, but it puts you in that direction. The second direction, the second outlet, is that they fail again. And what that's going to do is put in John Sherman's mind, I would say hopefully, that this group can't make another selection. I know it's likely not going to be next year because with 18-year-olds, you're not going to punt on them being a good player if they're struggling in year one. But I think we'll have a good direction where they're headed. They're really struggling in year one. I'm not going to be as high on those picks. But I would say by the end of next year, if there's no progression, that would be my indication at least in going, this was not right. That was wasting another top 10 pick. And who knows if they would waste a top 5 pick next year. That would be alarming to me. But those are the only two directions we're going, at least in my opinion. One way, they actually develop these guys and they turn them into big league talent, above average big league talent. The other way, they fail again. They repeat history, lose the trust in the fan base all over again, and hopefully that would signal to John Sherman this group is not cut out in doing it. They didn't really change much with the scouting department. That has concerned a lot of fans. Well, they better damn well be right on these 3 picks. I tweeted out last night, and it was a bit controversial, that I felt like they needed 3 stars with their next 3 first-round picks. Not MVPs. Just look at the Baltimore Orioles format. They hit on their last 4 first-round picks. All guys that were in the top 100. The last 3 years, they've had guys in the top 10. Major League Baseball for prospects. That's the model you follow. Tonight, another underslot pick. I'm not sure it's following the formula, but time will tell. Not going to punt on 18-year-old kids just being busts right off the bat. I'm going to give it some time. And then tomorrow, I'm going to have a recap of a couple more picks and where we stand on them. But that'll wrap up another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. Be sure to follow along and subscribe. You can check us out on Spotify. You can check us out on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and YouTube. Just hit that subscribe button, that follow button, and you will never miss any Locked On Royals news, breaking news, thoughts, opinions, and always be sure to shoot me your questions and thoughts on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.